The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. "Don't fake it," she had whispered, her eyes holding his with an intensity that made his heart skip. In that moment, everything changed for Mark Collins, a single father who had only been trying to make a joke to lighten the mood at their office holiday party. He never expected those two simple words to completely upend his carefully structured life. Mark stood frozen in the corner of the elegantly decorated conference room, the festive music suddenly seeming distant as he tried to process what his boss, Eliza Montgomery, had just implied. The Christmas lights twinkled around them, casting a warm glow that contrasted with the December chill outside the windows of Montgomery Publishing. 3 years had passed since Mark's wife, Sarah, died in a car accident, leaving him to raise their daughter, Emma, alone. 3 years of learning to be both mother and father to a child who asked questions he couldn't answer. 3 years of microwaved dinners and late nights checking homework after putting in overtime at the publishing house where he worked as a senior editor. Eliza had been his boss for just over a year. She was brilliant, driven, and surprisingly kind despite her reputation for being demanding. At 38, she was only 2 years older than Mark, but her accomplishments made him feel decades behind. She had transformed Montgomery Publishing from a struggling family business she inherited into one of the most respected independent publishers in the country. Mark had never considered her as anything more than his boss. Or at least, that's what he told himself as he drove home that night, his knuckles white against the steering wheel, her whispered "don't" echoing in his mind. It had started innocently enough. The annual Christmas party was in full swing, and Mark was standing with a small group of colleagues when the topic of holiday family gatherings came up. "My mother keeps asking when I'm going to bring someone home," Eliza had said, rolling her eyes as she sipped her wine. Apparently running a successful business isn't enough to impress her. Family can be tough, Mark had agreed, thinking of his own parents who constantly worried about him and Emma. "My mother-in-law still sends me eligible women's phone numbers." The group had laughed, and in that moment of camaraderie, Mark had made the joke that would change everything. "Tell you what, Eliza," he'd said with a grin, "if you need to shut your mother up, I'll fake being your boyfriend this Christmas. I'm pretty good at pretending to be interested in publishing trends I don't understand." He'd expected her to laugh it off. Instead, she'd looked at him with those intense green eyes, leaned close, and whispered, "Don't fake it." Now, as Mark pulled into his driveway, he saw the living room light was still on. His mother must be waiting up for him. She watched Emma whenever he had work events, a blessing he never took for granted. "How was the party?" his mother asked as he hung his coat. "Fine," he said, unable to meet her eyes. "How was Emma?" "An angel, as always. She's excited about her Christmas concert tomorrow." Mark nodded, guilt washing over him. He'd almost forgotten about Emma's concert. Between the deadline for their spring catalog and the holiday rush, December had become a blur of responsibilities. "You look troubled," his mother observed, her eyes too perceptive. "Just tired," he lied. "Thanks for watching her, Mom." After his mother left, Mark checked on Emma. At 8 years old, she slept surrounded by stuffed animals, her dark hair, so like her mother's, spread across the pillow. The sight of her peaceful face centered him, as it always did. Whatever confusion Eliza's words had stirred up, Emma remained his priority. The next morning brought no clarity. Mark went through the motions of their routine, making breakfast, helping Emma pick out clothes for her concert, dropping her at school with promises to be in the front row that evening, all while replaying Eliza's whisper in his mind. At work, he half expected things to be awkward, but Eliza was professional as ever during their morning meeting, discussing the marketing strategy for their new literary fiction title as if nothing had happened. Only once, when their hands accidentally touched as they both reached for the same report, did he notice a slight flush on her cheeks. By lunchtime, Mark had convinced himself he'd misinterpreted her words. Maybe she'd simply meant she didn't need his help with her family. Maybe the intensity he'd perceived was just the effect of the wine and the holiday atmosphere. He was about to head out for a sandwich when Eliza appeared in his office doorway. "Do you have a minute?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. Mark nodded, his mouth suddenly dry. Eliza closed the door behind her and took the seat across from his desk. For a moment, she said nothing, just studied him with those thoughtful green eyes. "About last night," she finally began. "I think I may have made you uncomfortable." "No, not at all," Mark said quickly. "I was the one who made the inappropriate joke. I apologize for that." Eliza shook her head. "Your joke was fine. My response was, perhaps too forward." The air between them felt charged with unspoken possibilities. "What did you mean?" Mark asked, surprising himself with his directness. Eliza took a deep breath. "I meant that if you were interested in accompanying me to my family's Christmas gathering, I wouldn't want it to be fake." She held his gaze steadily, though he could see the vulnerability behind her professional demeanor. "I've respected you as a colleague for a long time, Mark. But I've also come to admire you as a person, your dedication to your work, to your daughter. The way you've handled everything life has thrown at you." Mark felt as if the ground had shifted beneath him. "Eliza, You don't need to respond now," she said quickly. "I know this is complicated. You have Emma to consider, and there's the matter of our professional relationship." She stood up. "Take some time to think about it. No pressure either way." As she reached for the door, Mark found his voice. "Emma has a Christmas concert tonight at her school. Would you like to come?" The smile that lit up Eliza's face made his heart race. "I'd love to." That evening, as Emma's class sang Silent Night, Mark found himself glancing at Eliza seated beside him. She caught his eye and smiled, and for the first time since Sarah died, he felt a flutter of possibility. After the concert, Emma bounded up to them, her face flushed with excitement. "Did you like it, Daddy? Did you hear my solo?" "You were amazing, sweetheart," Mark said, hugging her tightly. Emma turned curious eyes to Eliza. "Are you Daddy's boss? He talks about you a lot." Mark felt his face heat up, but Eliza just laughed. "Yes, I am. And you must be Emma. Your dad talks about you all the time too. You were wonderful tonight." Emma beamed at the praise. "Are you coming to our house? Daddy and I always have hot chocolate after special occasions." Mark started to explain that Eliza probably had other plans, but she surprised him by saying, "I'd love some hot chocolate, if that's okay with your dad." And so they found themselves in Mark's modest kitchen, Emma chattering away about her school and friends while Mark prepared hot chocolate with the mini marshmallows that Emma insisted were essential. As he watched Eliza listening intently to his daughter's stories, responding with genuine interest and asking thoughtful questions, something warm unfurled in his chest. It had been so long since he'd allowed himself to feel this way that he almost didn't recognize it, hope. Later, after Emma had gone to bed, Mark walked Eliza to her car. "Thank you for inviting me," she said softly. "Emma is wonderful." "She liked you," Mark replied. "She doesn't warm up to people easily since Sarah died." The mention of his late wife hung between them, unavoidable. "Mark," Eliza said gently, "I know how much you loved Sarah. I would never expect to replace her." "I know," he said, and was surprised to find he meant it. "But that doesn't mean there isn't room for something new." The smile she gave him then was worth all the uncertainty he'd felt throughout the day. "So," she said, a hint of mischief in her eyes, "about that offer to accompany me to my family's Christmas gathering." Mark laughed. "Are you sure you want to subject me to your mother's scrutiny?" "Absolutely," Eliza said. "But only if you're not faking it." "I wouldn't dream of it," he replied, and as the snow began to fall gently around them, he leaned in and kissed her. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions for Mark. He found himself navigating unfamiliar territory, the beginning of a relationship while balancing his responsibilities as a father and his professional role. He and Eliza agreed to keep things discreet at work, though he suspected their colleagues had noticed the change in their dynamic. Emma, surprisingly, was his strongest supporter. "I like Ms. Montgomery," she declared one evening as Mark tucked her in. "She doesn't talk to me like I'm a baby." "Is that so?" Mark asked, smoothing her hair. Emma nodded solemnly. "And she makes you smile. You didn't smile much before." The observation, so simple yet profound, brought a lump to Mark's throat. "I'm trying to smile more," he managed to say. "Mom would want you to be happy," Emma said, with the straightforward wisdom that children sometimes possess. "She told me that, you know. Before she went to heaven. She said we should always try to be happy." Mark blinked back tears. "When did she tell you that?" "In the hospital. When you went to get coffee." Emma yawned. "I remember." Mark kissed her forehead, amazed once again by his daughter's resilience. "Your mom was very wise." As Christmas approached, Mark found himself facing the prospect of meeting Eliza's family with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The Montgomery family was old money and influence, a far cry from his middle-class upbringing. "They're going to hate me," he told Eliza as they shared lunch in a cafe far enough from the office to avoid gossip. "They're going to love you," she countered. "And even if they didn't, which they will, it wouldn't matter to me." The confidence in her voice steadied him. Over the past weeks, he discovered that beneath Eliza's polished exterior was a woman who valued authenticity above all else. It was one of the many things he was coming to love about her. Love. The word had crept into his thoughts when he wasn't looking. Was it too soon? Was he betraying Sarah's memory? These questions haunted him, especially late at night when doubt seemed to grow larger in the darkness. He found unexpected comfort in a conversation with his father-in-law, David, who had stopped by to drop off Christmas gifts for Emma. "Sarah would want you to move forward," David said, after Mark hesitantly mentioned Eliza. "She wouldn't want you to be alone." "How can you be so sure?" Mark asked. David's eyes were kind. "Because I knew my daughter. And because that's what love is, wanting happiness for those we care about, even when we're not there to share it." The day before Christmas Eve, Mark and Emma joined Eliza for the drive to her family's estate in Connecticut. Emma was bubbling with excitement, her backpack filled with books and the small gifts she had carefully selected for Eliza's family. "What if they don't like me?" Mark whispered to Eliza as they approached the imposing house, Christmas lights twinkling along its roofline. Eliza squeezed his hand. "Just be yourself." "That's who She stopped, then continued more softly, "That's who I care about." The word she hadn't said hung between them, full of promise. The Montgomery family gathering was larger and more formal than Mark was used to, but not as intimidating as he had feared. Eliza's mother, Catherine, was reserved but welcoming, her father, Richard, gruffly cordial. Her brother James and his wife immediately took to Emma, introducing her to their own children who were close to her age. "So you're the editor my daughter speaks so highly of," Catherine said during dinner, her appraising gaze reminding Mark of Eliza's. "I'm fortunate to work with her," Mark replied honestly. "She's transformed the company." Catherine nodded, seemingly satisfied. "And you're raising your daughter alone? That can't be easy." "It's not," Mark admitted. "But Emma makes it worthwhile." Something in Catherine's expression softened. Children have a way of doing that. Later, as the family gathered in the living room for their tradition of reading, 'twas the night before Christmas, Mark found himself seated beside Eliza on a love seat, Emma leaning against his side, half asleep. The warmth of the fire, the soft glow of the Christmas tree lights, and the comfort of being surrounded by people who were beginning to feel like an extension of family filled him with a contentment he hadn't expected to feel again. When Eliza's father finished reading and the younger children were ushered off to bed, Catherine approached them. "Eliza tells me you joked about pretending to be her boyfriend for Christmas," she said to Mark, her eyes twinkling with amusement. Mark felt his face flush. I'm glad you decided not to fake it, Catherine continued. My daughter deserves someone genuine. As she walked away, Eliza leaned close to whisper in his ear, told you she'd like you. That night, after Emma was asleep in the guest room she shared with Eliza's nieces, Mark and Eliza stood on the balcony outside her childhood bedroom, watching the snow fall gently on the expansive grounds. Thank you for bringing us here, Mark said. Emma is having the time of her life. And you? Eliza asked, turning to face him. Mark searched for the right words. I'm happier than I thought I could be again. Eliza's eyes shimmered in the moonlight. Mark, I need to tell you something. His heart quickened. What is it? When I whispered "don't" at the Christmas party, I was terrified I was making a huge mistake. Not just professionally, but personally. I've watched you this past year, seen how devoted you are to Emma, how hard you work, how you never complain even when I know you're exhausted. She took a deep breath. I was afraid to admit how much I'd come to care for you. Mark took her hands in his. I was afraid too. Afraid of betraying Sarah's memory. Afraid of disrupting Emma's life. Afraid of risking our professional relationship. And now? Eliza asked softly. Now I'm only afraid of not telling you how I feel. Mark's voice was steady despite the pounding of his heart. I'm falling in love with you, Eliza. And it doesn't feel like a betrayal anymore. It feels like a gift. The smile that lit up her face was brighter than all the Christmas lights adorning the estate. I love you too, she whispered, and as they kissed beneath the falling snow, Mark felt the final pieces of his broken heart begin to heal. Christmas morning dawned clear and bright. Emma woke them early, bouncing with excitement about presents and the promise of sledding on the hill behind the house. As Mark watched his daughter open gifts alongside Eliza's nieces and nephews, he felt a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced in years. Eliza sat beside him, her hand finding his as they watched the children's delight. Merry Christmas, she murmured. The merriest, he replied, and meant it. Later, as they all bundled up for sledding, Emma tugged on Mark's sleeve. Daddy, is Ms. Montgomery going to be my new mom? The question caught him off guard. Emma, honey, we've only been dating a short time. These things take. But you love her, right? I can tell. Emma's expression was serious. And she loves you. And I like her a lot. Mark knelt down to his daughter's level. Would that be okay with you? If someday, not right away, Eliza became a part of our family? Emma considered this, her small face thoughtful. I think Mom would say yes. She always wanted us to be happy. Mark hugged her tightly, his heart full. Your mom was very wise. Outside, the snow-covered landscape sparkled in the sunlight as they joined the others on the sledding hill. Mark watched as Eliza helped Emma position her sled, giving her pointers on how to steer. The two of them laughing together was a sight that filled him with joy. As Emma pushed off down the hill with a squeal of delight, Eliza returned to Mark's side. Everything okay? She asked, noticing. As Emma pushed off down the hill with a squeal of delight, Eliza returned to Mark's side. Everything okay? She asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. Perfect, he said, pulling her close. Emma just asked if you were going to be her new mom. Eliza's eyes widened. What did you tell her? I asked if she would be okay with that someday. She said yes. Mark watched her face carefully. I hope that wasn't presumptuous of me. Eliza's smile was radiant. Not at all. In fact, it's exactly what I was hoping to hear. They stood together, watching Emma race down the hill, her laughter carrying on the crisp winter air. Mark marveled at how life could change so completely in just a few weeks. From a joke at a Christmas party to standing here with a woman he was falling deeply in love with, surrounded by a family that was beginning to feel like his own. That evening, after a day filled with sledding, snowball fights, and a magnificent Christmas dinner, the family gathered in the living room for games and conversation. Mark noticed Catherine watching him and Eliza with a knowing smile. "You know," she said quietly when she caught him alone, "I've been trying to set Eliza up with suitable men for years. She never showed interest in any of them." "I'm hardly suitable," Mark replied with a self-deprecating smile. "A widower with a young daughter, working for her company." Catherine's expression softened. "You're exactly what she needs. Someone real. Someone who understands that success isn't just about business achievements." She glanced at Eliza, who was teaching Emma and her cousins a card game. "I've never seen my daughter this happy." As the evening wound down and the younger children were put to bed, Mark found himself on the balcony again, this time alone with his thoughts. The past 3 years had been a journey through grief and adjustment, learning to be both mother and father to Emma while keeping his own heart carefully guarded. He hadn't expected to find love again, certainly not with his brilliant, beautiful boss. Yet here he was, feeling more alive than he had in years. "Penny for your thoughts," Eliza said, joining him with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. Mark accepted one gratefully. "I was just thinking about how different this Christmas is from what I expected." "Good different or bad different?" she asked, a hint of vulnerability in her voice. "The best kind of different," he assured her. "When I made that joke at the party, I never imagined we'd end up here." Eliza leaned against the railing beside him. "What made you say it in the first place? The joke about being my fake boyfriend?" Mark considered the question. "Honestly, I think part of me wanted an excuse to be closer to you, even if I wasn't ready to admit it to myself. And I wasn't brave enough to just ask you out properly," Eliza admitted. "So I'm glad you made that joke." "And I'm glad you whispered don't," Mark replied, setting down his mug to take her hands in his. "Don't fake it. Best advice I've ever received." Eliza laughed softly. "I was terrified when I said that. I thought I might have just ruined everything, our working relationship, the respect you had for me. Instead, you gave me the courage to open my heart again." Mark drew her closer. "Thank you for that." As they kissed under the starlit sky, snow beginning to fall once more around them, Mark knew with certainty that this was just the beginning of their story. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a blur of happiness. They extended their stay at the Montgomery estate, Emma bonding with her new friends and Mark getting to know Eliza's family better. By the time they returned to the city, something fundamental had shifted in their relationship. "Move in with us," Mark said on New Year's Eve as they stood on his small balcony, watching fireworks light up the sky. Eliza looked surprised. "Are you sure? What about Emma?" "Emma adores you. And I." Mark took a deep breath. "I love you, Eliza. I know it's fast, but when you know, you know." Her eyes shimmered with tears. "I love you too. But what about work? The company has policies about relationships between managers and employees." Mark had thought about this. "I can transfer to another department. Or find a position at another publisher if necessary. What I can't do is pretend I don't want to build a life with you." Eliza's answer was to kiss him as the clock struck midnight, the new year beginning with promise and possibility. The transition wasn't without challenges. There were raised eyebrows at work when they disclosed their relationship, though most of their colleagues seemed genuinely happy for them. They decided that Mark would transfer to head the fiction department, reporting to the editorial director rather than directly to Eliza. Emma had moments of confusion and occasional jealousy as she adjusted to sharing her father's attention, but Eliza approached these moments with patience and understanding. "She's testing boundaries," Eliza said after a particularly difficult evening when Emma had refused to go to bed. "It's actually a good sign. It means she feels secure enough to push back." Mark marveled at Eliza's insight. "How did you get so wise about children?" "I read a lot," she admitted with a smile. "Child psychology books, parenting forums. I wanted to understand what Emma might be going through. The revelation that Eliza had been researching how to be a good stepparent touched Mark deeply. "You're amazing, you know that?" By spring, they had settled into a comfortable routine. Weekday morning